Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Well, Liverpool and Manchester United both trying to achieve their goals. Liverpool trying to build a gap over Manchester City and United trying to move away in the top four race. Both sides would be disappointed with the 0-0 draw at Old Trafford. Where did Liverpool go wrong? What did Manchester United do right? Don't worry, here at the interviews, we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, we're going to briefly break down how Liverpool and Manchester United drew 0-0. So before we get into today's video, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/footy analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. In today's video, we're going to break down the first half, see how both sides look to approach the game, and how Manchester United were able to cause Liverpool some problems despite their territorial dominance. Then we'll move to the second half, see how United were able to shift their formation to ensure that Liverpool struggled to create chances. But first, let's get to the starting lineups. We look at Manchester United, more of a 4-4-2 diamond. Rashford and Lukaku ahead of Juan Mata, Ander Herrera and Paul Pogba out in the shuttling roles, and Scott McTominay ahead of the back four. Then we look to Liverpool 4-3-3, Salah, Firmino, Mane up front. In midfield, they went with Fabinho at the base with Jordan Henderson and Wijnaldum just ahead of him. So with that being said, now let's get to the first half, see how both sides look to approach the game and why there was a tactical battle in that midfield. So when we look at Manchester United against Liverpool, there was no real surprise that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did go with the 4-4-2 diamond. We've seen him do this against Spurs, against Arsenal, and against Chelsea with some good success. So here, it kind of made sense. And they had ploys that obviously they could identify ways to goal. With that being said, you have Milner and you have Robertson that are probably going to look to push forward. You're able to have Lukaku and Rashford dart into that space in transition. That's what they wanted. On the flip side, you have those two at fullback for Liverpool. You can peel Lukaku to either side, try to get him to tower over those two markers to use his aerial presence to force Alisson to some saves. With that being said, they matched up well across the midfield. Mata kind of sitting on Fabinho, ensuring that he doesn't get on the ball, but vice versa. Fabinho doesn't want Mata to get the ball in between the lines to ensure that he could play passes out to those forwards. In midfield, you have it balanced out pretty well. Pogba against Jordan Henderson, Wijnaldum against Herrera. We saw the battle between Pogba and Henderson throughout, where Pogba was getting the better of him, playing safe passes, forcing Henderson into fouls, ensuring that Henderson couldn't push forward. So that's what happened there. But the flip side here was the thing that Milner was able to push forward and he dragged Pogba out of position because Luke Shaw dealt with Mo Salah. He couldn't really step forward. So Pogba was often having to deal with that threat, unlike when they played at Chelsea earlier on last week, where Azpilicueta wasn't really looking to push forward. James Milner was on countless occasions. With that being said, that did leave avenues for United to break into, so it wasn't the worst thing, but it did put an extra work on Paul Pogba. On the other side, you had Wijnaldum against Herrera. If Wijnaldum did push forward, they could have McTominay step to him and block off that passing range, but Herrera was in that battle also, so that's where United were able to combat in midfield. So when you think about where Liverpool were trying to find their areas of attack, it didn't really work out for them. We've seen them struggle in away games this season, but find ways to provide a moment of brilliance or force defenders into mistakes. They had Salah dealing with Luke Shaw, and he struggled throughout. Luke Shaw was able to, whenever he tried to post up on Luke Shaw, Shaw was able to win 1v1. Shaw won the 1v1 battles when Salah was running at him, and he kind of negated that threat there. On the other side, you had Mane looking to cut in centrally, drop off deeper to get on the ball, and there was no real threat from him either. Liverpool lacked a link in midfield despite controlling majority of the tempo of the game, because eventually United dropped off into more of a 4-5-1 with Lukaku and Rashford kind of tucking in more so, and they had Mata sitting onto Fabinho throughout. So with that being said, Matip and Van Dijk did have a lot of the ball as the game wore on, but they couldn't find the front three in areas where they could really threaten the United backline. When those two were when Liverpool were able to find and create their chances, it really developed from wide areas where they're able to get combination play out in those zones. However, when they delivered cross into the box, United's backline comfortably dealt with them. So that was how United kind of set up. And when we look to some of their chances, although Liverpool did control the territorial dominance in the throughout that first half, United were able to create the better chances. A lot of it stemmed from direct play. Ashley Young, Firmino coming across there. Ashley Young just easily clipping a ball over the top, and we see Rashford bring it down with Lukaku running off actually Van Dijk, and we have Rashford bringing it down goal side of Matip, but he drops back a bit and he's unable to get a clean shot on goal, and it falls to Alisson. Shortly after that, a De Gea punt into the left channel. You have Rashford dragging out Robertson, and as he drags out Robertson, he's held up there as Henderson drops off to help him, but now that frees up Pogba, and he plays it off to Pogba, and Pogba delivers a cross into the box for Lukaku, trying to tower over at the far post, but Van Dijk clears his lines there. The final opportunity, again, is another punt from Young, who tries to find Rashford breaking in between the center backs, but Van Dijk cleared his lines. That was how they were going about things. But as the game wore on, what did we see? Well, prior to that, we have to get to how Liverpool did press, because Liverpool did press in a similar fashion where they had Firmino kind of in the central positions. When the center backs were often out, they had Mane and Salah blocking off those passes into the fullbacks. But when you had Mane or Salah kind of stepping into the center backs, you would have the shuttlers push out to the fullbacks to ensure that they were unable to get onto the ball. And that's how Liverpool were going about things. But their pressing did change as the half wore on, because Firmino left the game and they brought on Daniel Sturridge. With Daniel Sturridge on, he doesn't press as energetic. He doesn't have the energetic pressing that Firmino offers, so he often sat ahead of Scott McTominay to ensure that passes weren't played into him. And then we saw Mane and Salah still occupying that space in between the center backs to ensure that they were unable to get in between the fullbacks to ensure that they were unable to get passes, and that allowed the center backs to be on the ball, and Lindelof and Smalling. However, we did see changes for United. Eventually, Lingard came on for Mata. We saw Andreas Pereira come on for Herrera, and eventually United did gain some of the better chances besides the ones that we mentioned prior. One of them saw Pereira win a loose ball ahead of Mane and slide a pass into Lukaku, who was able to drop off and spin his marker, and when he spins him, he's able to slide the ball out to Pogba, who gets ahead of Milner in that left channel, and he drives forward. And when you have Matip coming across, able to square the ball to Lukaku, who's then able to play a pass in between Van Dijk and Fabinho for Lingard breaking free in behind Van Dijk. And when he gets onto that ball, he should shoot first, but he tries to round Alisson, and Alisson gets across to intervene. That led to him getting hurt, and Alexis Sanchez coming on in the final stages. Alexis Sanchez did play in the hole, and he quickly nearly led to an opportunity because Milner's poor pass from right back is intercepted by Alexis, and he eventually drives down into that left channel to hold off Henderson, cuts out, cuts in, finally slides the ball in behind Milner for Rashford breaking into that space, but Matip tracks him well and pokes it back to Alexis, who gains a yard on Milner, delivers across to the far post, and we see Lukaku get ahead of Robertson over him to not a tame effort on goal. But that was how the first half kind of really developed. United matched up well in midfield, but Pogba was pushed back a bit, and despite Liverpool having majority of the possession, David De Gea was never really tested. United, on the other hand, went long despite the injuries that they did occur. They went long, tried to break Rashford in free, had the breaks where Lingard possibly should have scored, and you could argue that they were probably deserving of a goal. So now let's get to the second half, see how United coped with all these changes, what tactical system changes they had to make, and if Liverpool were able to respond. So when we look at the second half, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did make a tactical change, moving to a 4-5-1, and this made sense. We had Marcus Rashford, who still looked a bit injured, so he played up front, but it did limit Manchester United's counter-attacking threat. So large spells of that second half were played in United's half, but they were very comfortable in their base shape. They did condense space between the lines. They moved to a 4-5-1 to ensure that Pogba or Pereira wouldn't have to be pulled out into wider zones to deal with the fullbacks of Milner and Robertson pushing forward, and Lukaku and Sanchez did a decent job. Robertson and Milner barely had any attacking threat or contribution to Liverpool's spineless attack, and that really helped out United there. And in midfield, they matched up equally. You had Wijnaldum against Pereira, you had Henderson against Pogba still, and McTominay now could step out to Fabinho when need be. Mo Salah still struggled to get in the game, and Luke Shaw really kept him quiet. You had Mane kind of trying to run across the center backs to offer a threat or drop into midfield, but he wasn't influencing the game, and there was no real service for Daniel Sturridge, who didn't really offer much of a threat, and it kind of didn't make sense that Shaqiri possibly wasn't brought on so that Salah could stretch the pitch and you could have a bit of an invention and a player could offer you a goal-scoring threat from different positions on in the final third opposed to Sturridge, but that wasn't how they went about it, and United still had the better chances in the second half by sticking to their game plan, just with different players. You had De Gea roll the ball out to Ashley Young, and he tried to clip a diagonal ball over the center backs, and Rashford actually did break in free running across Van Dijk, but his first touch wasn't that great with Matip tracking him, and the ball fell to Alisson. They also had the threat of Lukaku down the right-hand side, delivering crosses to the far post. The first one saw Alexis challenge Milner, and Milner nodded the ball up in the air for Pogba to nod it into the path of Rashford in left half space, but he squandered his shot wide. With that being said, we eventually saw Liverpool make a few changes. They ended up bringing on Shaqiri eventually for Henderson, and they ended up moving to a 4-4-2 with Salah moving up high, Sturridge in behind him, and then they had Salah and Shaqiri out in the wider areas. Shaw still coped well with Shaqiri, who didn't really get himself into the game. And now the midfield battle was even simpler for United because they would just push the shuttlers out to that midfield, and then now they could have McTominay deal with Sturridge dropping off a bit deeper, although Sturridge often tried to push a bit forward, and if Salah tried to move into that space, McTominay was there. What happened now was that eventually they brought a Origi for Salah. That didn't work either. Two players that could offer a penalty box presence, but again, no real service into them, and Liverpool just struggled to really get going. We've seen them kind of struggle in away matches or in games in general, just creating quality chances, but they were able to get by through the moment of brilliance from the front three. But when the front three isn't clicking, then they really lack a creative player in those central zones to offer much of a threat. They had Fabinho from deep clipping diagonals out to the fullbacks in Milner and Robertson, but nothing really stemmed from those chances, and United had the final best chance of the game. You had McTominay a bit deeper, sliding the ball in between Mane and in between Wijnaldum for Pogba, who dropped off Luke Shaw, and Shaw dropped off of Robertson, and Robertson couldn't step to him because Lukaku was occupying him out in the wider zone. Pogba shifted the ball out to him, and Lukaku's cross over Van Dijk went across Matip and Smalling, who didn't attack the ball. But when you break down the game as a whole, although Solskjaer's tactics were predictable, there was an intent to break in behind the fullbacks, keep the midfield tight, and possibly use Lukaku as a ploy in the wider zones. We thought to possibly tower over opponents, which we did see in the first half, but then be the provider in the second half, whereas Liverpool really struggled to get their attack going. Once Firmino got off, their pressing wasn't that great, and they never tested David De Gea, and that's a big issue for a title contender, as now their gap at the top of the table is only 1 point. But let me know what you guys think. Can United use this result as a boost to push forward in that top four race, or will these injuries set them back? And what about Liverpool struggling in this title hunt? Have they run out of gas? Have they run out of steam? And will Firmino's absence really hurt them? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.